The dust never really settled on the plains outside Red Hollow. It just hovered, clinging to the air like an old memory that refused to fade. Eli Mercer knew that kind of dust well. It lived in the cracks of his boots and the lines on his hands. And deep in the land he fought every day to keep alive. The ranch had once stretched wide and proud, cattle grazing like a moving river under the sun, fences straight and strong, laughter carried by the wind. Now it sagged under debt and drought, cattle thinning like his hope. Every morning Eli rose before the sun, fed the horses, patched fences with wire he reused too many times, and prayed the land would forgive him for not being enough. He was a man built of quiet strength and worn resolve, the kind that didn't beg for pity and didn't expect miracles. So when he rode into town that day, hat low, shoulders heavy, he wasn't looking for salvation, just a way to survive another season. Red Hollow bustled louder than usual, voices thick with excitement and cruelty alike. A sale was happening, not cattle, not land, people. The kind of auction men pretended wasn't slavery by calling it contracts and placements. Eli hated it, always had, but he needed a ranch hand desperately. Someone who could ride hard, work harder, and stay. The men who drifted through never lasted. They drank, stole, or ran when the work got rough. He tied his horse outside the old trading hall, ignoring the laughter spilling from inside, telling himself he'd just ask around and leave. But then he heard her voice. It wasn't loud. It wasn't pleading. It was raw, sharp as a blade dragged across stone. I said I won't kneel. The room quieted for a heartbeat, then erupted in laughter. Eli stepped inside before he could stop himself. Lantern light revealed a wooden cage in the center of the hall, iron bars bolted thick and unforgiving. Inside was a woman. No, not a woman the way men in that room saw her. She was something untamed. Long dark hair hung loose and wild, eyes burning with fury and fear and pride all at once. Her dress was plain and torn at the hem, dirt smeared along her arms, but she held herself like she'd rather break than bend. A man beside the cage sneered. Too wild for housework, too sharp for manners. Ran off 3 times, tried to bite one buyer and broke another's nose. The crowd laughed again. Perfect for a man who wants a challenge. Eli's jaw tightened. This wasn't why he came. He told himself to turn away. But he couldn't stop watching her hands, scarred, strong, gripping the bars like she was testing their weakness. She wasn't begging. She wasn't crying. She was waiting. For what, Eli didn't know. Maybe for the world to finally finish what it started. Bidding began, crude and mocking. Men shouted numbers like they were buying a horse they planned to break by morning. The woman met their eyes one by one, memorizing faces, storing rage like fuel. When a bidder bragged about teaching her obedience, she spat at his boots. The hall roared with laughter again. Eli felt something twist in his chest. Something old and dangerous. He remembered his sister, sold off after their father died. Remembered how powerless he'd been then. Without thinking, he raised his hand. The room stilled. The auctioneer squinted. You sure, Mercer? She ain't domestic, ain't gentle, ain't grateful. Eli swallowed. I need a ranch hand. More laughter. That thing? The auctioneer scoffed. She won't last a week. The woman turned, slowly, to look at Eli. For the first time, her eyes held something other than fury, calculation. She studied him like she studied horses, searching for weakness, truth, danger. Eli held her gaze, steady, unflinching. The final bid fell. The cage door opened with a metallic groan that echoed louder than the cheers. Papers were shoved into Eli's hands, coins taken from his dwindling purse. He hated the transaction even as he signed his name. When the man unlocked the cage, the woman didn't rush out. She stepped forward deliberately, eyes never leaving Eli. What's your name? He asked quietly. She hesitated, then answered, voice low. Maeve. One of the men laughed. Don't bother remembering it. She won't stay. Eli nodded once. We'll see. Outside, the sun dipped low, staining the sky red like a warning. Maeve walked beside Eli toward his horse, unshackled but not free, every muscle coiled tight as a drawn bow. I won't sleep in a house, she said suddenly. I won't be touched. I won't be owned. Eli stopped, turned to face her. You won't be any of those things, he said. You'll work if you want. You'll leave if you want. I don't buy people. I made a bad deal with a bad world. She searched his face for lies, found none she could name. Still, trust didn't come easy. As they rode out of Red Hollow, dust rising behind them, Maeve didn't look back. Neither did Eli. Neither of them knew that this I'd born from desperation and defiance would reshape everything. They thought they were. And if this story already has you leaning closer, wondering how two broken lives could possibly ride the same path, the ranch came into view just as the last smear of daylight surrendered to night. The land stretching wide and lonely like a truth too big to argue with. Maeve studied it in silence from the saddle behind Eli, memorizing every fence post, every slope, every shadow where a man could hide or a woman could run. The house sat low and weather-beaten, boards warped by sun and seasons, lantern light flickering like a cautious invitation rather than a command. Eli dismounted first and tied the horse, moving with the practiced economy of someone who wasted nothing. Not words, not effort, not hope. He didn't reach for her, didn't offer help unless she asked. That alone unsettled Maeve more than shackles ever had. She slid down on her own, boots hitting the dirt with a quiet finality, and took a breath that tasted of hay, sweat and freedom edged with fear. "Barn's there," Eli said, pointing. "Water pump behind the house. You can sleep where you like. No rules. No warnings. No threats." Maeve nodded once and walked toward the barn as if she'd always belonged to wide places. That first night she didn't sleep. She listened. Wind through the slats. Horses shifting. Eli moving in the house, a chair scraping, a kettle set down. She expected boots at the door, a demand, a test. None came. By dawn she was already awake, brushing a roan gelding with a tenderness that surprised even her. Eli watched from a distance, pretending to fix a hinge while noting the way the horse leaned into her hands, the way she spoke under her breath, not commands but promises. When he finally approached, she didn't flinch. "You ride?" he asked. Maeve snorted softly. "I survive," he almost smiled. Work began without ceremony. Fences to mend, a calf with a lame leg to tend, water to haul from a creek that had retreated farther than last year. Maeve worked like someone racing an unseen clock, muscles remembering labor that had been used against her before. She didn't complain. She didn't ask. She learned the land with her feet and hands, and by noon she knew where the ground dipped, treacherously, and where the shade lingered longest. Eli showed her the tack, the feed schedule, the way the wind usually turned by evening. He never hovered. He never ordered. That too was a kind of test. Days passed, then a week. The ranch breathed a little easier. A storm threatened but didn't break. Maeve stayed. She slept in the barn loft by choice. Straw mattress rolled tight, knife under her palm. Some nights Eli left food by the steps without a word. Some mornings she found the coffee pot already hot. Trust grew the way grass does after drought, slow, stubborn, surprising. Trouble rode in on the 8th day. A pair of men from Red Hollow came calling, hats tilted with familiarity that soured the air. They leaned on the fence like it belonged to them. "Heard you bought a problem," one said, eyes sliding toward the barn.
"Came to see if you'd like to sell."
Before she breaks something important, Maeve heard them before Eli did. She stepped out into the open, shoulders squared, gaze level. The men laughed. "See? Wild." Eli walked to stand beside her, not in front, not behind. "She works here," he said evenly. "That's all there is." The taller man smirked. "Contracts don't work that way." Maeve's hand drifted near her knife. Eli felt it and spoke softly, a warning meant for both sides. "You're trespassing." The men left with promises sharpened into smiles. That night Maeve finally spoke more than a sentence. She told Eli about horses she'd trained with nothing but patience and grit. About being traded from place to place. Labeled difficult because she refused to disappear. She didn't tell him everything. She didn't have to. He listened like a man who knew silence was sometimes a gift. Weeks turned. Maeve rode the perimeter at dawn, fixing what broke before it broke worse. Eli slept better. The ranch showed signs of life, small, fragile, real. One afternoon a horse bolted, spooked by thunder. Maeve rode hard. Took a fall that left her breathless and bleeding. Eli reached her first, hand steady as he bound her arm. "I'm fine," she snapped, reflex more than truth. He met her glare. "I know." And somehow that meant he believed her strength without denying her pain. The men from town returned after dark. This time they brought paper and a badge borrowed from someone who liked bribes. Maeve stood her ground, spine straight as a fence post in winter. Eli burned the paper in the lantern flame. The wind carried ash away like an answer. When the men left, threats trailing behind them, Maeve laughed for the first time, short, disbelieving, free. She realized then that she wasn't being hidden. She was being chosen. And Eli realized that the ranch wasn't just surviving. It was changing him. If you're feeling that shift too, if you sense the storm building and the bond forming, subscribe now so you don't miss what comes next. Because the world doesn't forgive defiance easily, and Chapter 3 will test everything they've fought to build. The storm came at dawn, not from the sky but from the road, and Maeve felt it before she saw it. The way horses stilled, the way the air tightened like a held breath. Eli was already awake, pulling on his coat when the distant thud of hooves reached them both. There was no panic in him, only resolve sharpened by weeks of choosing right over easy. Maeve stood beside him on the porch, the land stretching quiet and honest before them, and for the first time in her life she didn't feel like running. 3 riders crested the rise, silhouettes hard against the pale morning, led by the same tall man from Red Hollow, his smile gone, replaced by the brittle certainty of someone who believed the world owed him obedience. He dismounted without greeting, producing papers with seals that meant less than the way he held his shoulders. "She's under dispute," he said, voice carrying like a verdict. "You can step aside, Mercer, and this ends clean." Maeve stepped forward first. "I choose where I stand," she said, calm and clear. The man's eyes flicked to her with irritation. Then back to Eli. "You're drowning in debt. Sell her back. We'll call it even." Eli didn't raise his voice. "She's not for sale." A pause stretched, long enough for truth to settle. The man's jaw tightened. "Then you'll lose. Everything." Maeve felt the old heat, eyes of fear braided with fury, but Eli's presence steadied her, not as a shield but as an equal weight beside her. He turned to her just for a second. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "If you want to go—" She shook her head. "I'm done being moved." The men advanced, one reaching for her arm. Maeve reacted on instinct, twisting free. But it was Eli who stepped between them, hands open, eyes hard. The confrontation broke like dry wood. Horses spooked, a fist flew. Someone stumbled into the fence. Maeve moved without thinking, guiding chaos away from harm the way she always had with animals, redirecting, grounding, refusing to escalate. When it was over, one man lay groaning in the dust. Pride cracked while the others backed away, threats hollow now that witnesses would come with daylight. They left with curses and promises that sounded small against the open land. Silence returned, heavier for having been broken. Maeve's hands shook as the adrenaline faded. Eli noticed and waited until she steadied herself before speaking. "You stayed," he said. She nodded. "You did too." The day unfolded differently after that, as if the ranch itself had decided. Clouds gathered and finally gave rain, slow and soaking, turning dust into dark, honest earth. Maeve rode the perimeter with Eli, showing him a better line for the fence, a smarter way to water the low ground. He listened. He learned. Partnership replaced permission. Weeks later, the ranch caught its breath, calves healthy, grass greening, neighbors lending hands that had been withheld before. Word traveled faster than threats. Mercer didn't bend, and the woman beside him wasn't owned. One evening, as the sun burned gold across the fields, Maeve took Eli to the far pasture where a young mare watched them warily. "She's green," Maeve said, voice soft. "They'll call her Trouble." Eli smiled faintly. "We'll call her Learning." Maeve swung into the saddle, patience radiating from her like warmth, and the mare responded step by careful step. Eli watched with a pride that surprised him. Not possession, not rescue, but recognition. Later, by the fire, Maeve spoke of the future without flinching. "I'll stay," she said, not as a promise owed, but as a choice made. Eli nodded, accepting the gift without trying to wrap it in rules. The land listened. It always did. If you've ridden this far with them, through dust and defiance into something earned, subscribe to the channel and stay with us. Because stories like this are about more than survival. They're about choosing who you ride beside, and discovering that freedom isn't given, it's claimed together.